and welcome to How to Be Irish. I'm so excited today to welcome the guest, Hannah Nash, to the studio. Hannah is currently doing a master's in psychotherapy, so she's incredibly passionate about physical and mental health. So we're going to have a lot of conversation around that. She's actually qualifying to be a psychotherapist next year. Hannah is also the host of the Greener Fields podcast. You may be familiar with it. It is a podcast which talks to Irish people in their 20s and in their 30s about living abroad versus living at home. So there's lots of conversations around emigration and such in this podcast. Greener Fields, it has over 45,000 downloads and 81 episodes. So it's absolute treasure trove of information. I really must say that Hannah is doing a public service to all of us Irish people here who are wondering whether they should stay at home or whether they should move abroad. So me and Hannah have many discussions about this. So I'm really looking forward to getting into it. So without further ado, let's begin the conversation with Hannah. I'm so excited to chat to you, Hannah. I really want to delve into everything that you have learned from doing Greener Fields. I know this is your first time. You're used to being the interviewer. You've never actually been interviewed.
100%. And that's what's so interesting is because I know it's funny having your own podcast. It's like becoming a counsellor and never going to counselling first. It feels like that for me. So it'll be very cool because also people keep asking me, they want to know my thoughts on things.
I was reflecting on the fact that you have done 81 episodes and you have done them continuously for how many months now?
I guess it was February 2022. I know it's a year and a half or a year and 7 months, right? Months. Yeah. I feel like the best thing I can say about that is that it's the consistency is what's helped it grow for sure. And so I'm a big believer in put something out even if it's not perfect. And if I waited for it to be perfect, I would have never started it ever. So I'm a big believer is imperfect is better than not done. And that's my big motto, as you can probably tell by everything I do.
You're only going to keep on going from strength to strength. You've 45,000 downloads now on Greener Fields, that is some feat. Like when you started out, were you did you have a goal in mind? I know you obviously, you came out with the concept, you wanted to explore the idea of Irish people in their 20s and 30s, living abroad, emigrating versus living at home in Ireland. Was that your goal to explore that? What did you set out to do?
Yeah, so I guess originally Greener Fields came about because essentially it was a conversation I kept having with friends, and ideally, I was in a place where I wasn't going anywhere. I was living in Mayo at the time. I was just beginning my second year, finishing my first year of a 3-year master's. And I knew I wasn't going anywhere, but it felt like everyone I knew was leaving. And from social media, it felt like it was always better elsewhere, especially where I wasn't, when it comes to the social life, the sunshine, the lifestyle, the work opportunities. But then when I would speak to people, it was kind of a little bit more, I guess they would tell me the reality that it maybe wasn't always perfect, that there's hard parts of emigration, that travel is amazing and wonderful, but you really sometimes want comfort or home or stability. And essentially I was kind of getting whiplash from what I saw online and what I felt about a situation that I wasn't in versus what the actual situation was. And I just wanted to answer this kind of question for myself, is it always better elsewhere? Tell the stories of Irish immigration. And it became something for me, I've always wanted to set up a podcast, but I didn't want to do a classic health podcast, even though that's where my qualifications lie. And when I got this idea in my head, I really remember so vividly calling my mom, being I'm going to set up this podcast. It's going to be called Greener Fields, and it's going to be talking to Irish people at home and abroad about their experiences. And it was so concrete. It felt like I'd been hit by it. And I think it was because I really wanted personally to know more about people and their stories about this, because especially I wasn't going anywhere. And I wanted to know, is it worth me trying to go to Australia as soon as I can? The highs and lows. I kind of wanted to know more about the reality of it all. And I was, purely driven by curiosity and a love of conversation, and what I learned is a love of listening as well. But yeah, definitely the first couple of episodes were talking to my friends who were abroad, and it's grown into something that is something I'm incredibly proud of.
I love that you said that it was when the idea came into your mind, it was so concrete, and you had the name, you had the purpose or the mission. It struck you. Mm-hmm. And I think I suppose I feel like you are doing a public service for young Irish people with greener fields. I feel like we are all facing that question. And I feel like Irish people have always faced that question. And something that I really want to delve into today with you is to understand, what are your thoughts on that? Like, why are Irish people obsessed with looking for those greener fields?
Yeah, I think what you mentioned there, is so true. Is that this like Irish immigration isn't new. It's historical, for better or for worse. We have been going around the world for, I mean, like I said, probably as long as history books have been written. That is kind of, a very unique, maybe not unique, but it's a part of our culture. And we think about the Titanic, and we think about the fact that everyone in America is related to an Irish person, and you can't go anywhere without someone saying something. And I think what Greener Fields fills the gap is that it's the first time that it's been digitally captured, and in this generation. And that's something I never really thought about until around Christmas this year, where I was like, this is a book. This is like a digital version of a story of this chapter in Ireland. And we're hearing perspectives of people. And when I was thinking about this podcast, I was thinking about not just my perspective, which is one thing, but about the 80, almost 90 conversations I've had over the last year and a bit, and what they've taught me about their perspective. And when it comes to immigration, I think it's very personal, particularly immigration. So I like to differentiate between immigration and travel, because they are different. And travel is, it's not consistent. You're not sure where you're going. You may come back. You're likely not working whilst traveling. Whereas immigration is, you're picking up your entire life and you're moving there. So you're buying toilet paper in a different supermarket, you're paying taxes, you're building a community, you're finding friends. And so specifically immigration, I think it's taught me that people in general are incredibly brave, and we don't give ourselves enough credit. So you're brave to stay, you're brave to go, because I definitely don't think it's as easy a decision, or easy like the repercussions of a decision that maybe we think when we see the boat parties on Bondi, or the kind of like London like weekend trips to markets and stuff like that. I think it's weighted. I think it's complicated for people's perception of home, where that is, and really, really individual, which I know probably doesn't answer specifically the question, but I think I've learned more that we can't blanket it. And I think some people in the media are like, they just want to go. I think it's, when it comes to immigration, it's an independence factor, it's a work factor, it's a rite of passage for some people factor, it's a privilege for others. But from my perspective of the conversation that I had, it's a lot more weighted than maybe we give credit for. It's a lot more challenging than I think we give credit for. And my big question that I'm getting asked now is, do we think they'll come home? And what do I think of that? Because I think historically immigration was jumping on the Titanic and never coming back. I think less will. I think less will because technology makes it easier to be away. We can stay more connected even like this. We know what's going up in the world. My sister is sending me news articles from the Irish Times that she thinks I'm interested in. She's in New York. And I also think it's really challenging to come home from abroad when it comes to the cost and the expense. And even if it's expensive in Sydney, which we all know it is, no one's saying it's not, there may be more pros to cons. Maybe they're already set up on the career ladder over there. So that's my expectation. Again, I don't know. We'll have to see in a couple of years. But yeah, I think it's complicated. I think it's challenging. I think people are brave whether they decide to stay or go, for sure.
I think you made a very interesting point there about how you believe that less people are coming back because of technology. Because I think my initial thoughts would have been that I feel like more people come back now. It's kind of like everyone's a bit of a boomerang. They kind of fling themselves out to Australia and then they're back some are back within a year, some do the 2 years. And then one of my friends, she's been there 5 years in Sydney and she's just back now this year and setting up her life in Dublin. So it's kind of like, I kind of always assumed I'm in Spain right now, but I will go back to Ireland, and I'm kind of almost waiting for the kind of critical mass of people to return so that I can return, so that there is things to do, people there, birthday parties to go to, these kinds of things, like I don't really want to return when we're still going to be in that phase of like leaving drinks. Like
Mm,
whenever I chat to my friends in Dublin, it's like, what are you up to this weekend? And they're like, just got another leaving drinks. I'm
mhm,
like, I don't know if I can face that. It's quite mentally draining. Like, do you find
mhm,
that as somebody who's still in Ireland right now? Are you planning to stay in Ireland? And then if
mhm.
that's the case, how is that for you personally?
Yeah, I think for me, I found maybe the first year or two, but kind of after the pandemic, it felt I was in Mayo. I lived in Mayo for a year and a half, and that was I feel like that was my adventure. I knew no one, fell in love with the place, stayed for a year, had the best time ever. Um, and for me, that was an adventure. I didn't know anyone, and it was wonderful, and I could work from home and everything like that. But it was during that time when I was thinking about coming back to Dublin, and I felt I was like, I'm going to have to reset up all again. And I had such great friends in Westport. I had such a community, and the idea of coming home to the unknown of, like, I had went away for college, so my school friends, we weren't just close. So I had been away already for 5 or 6 years. Um, what and how was I going to make friends when it did feel like every second Instagram story was a goodbye party, or a sunrise in Bondi? And I kind of made the decision. I think through this podcast, it's given me the most incredible opportunity to meet people from all around the world, but specifically a good chunk of Greener Fields is Irish people who have come home or who are at home, or have moved county. So we're in Ireland. And the people I've met there are the people who are still here now, who I would probably consider my closest friends. They're the ones who I keep talking about when it comes to the hiking trips, are the ones I've met purely because of the conversations I've had. Like yourself, Una, is a perfect example. And so I feel like I invested a good amount of time and energy, and being really awkward at the first time of going up to a social hike and wanting to turn the car around because I was like, I can't do this again, again. I did it, and they were the best decisions I've ever made. And I feel now that I have a good, concrete social support network at home. That wouldn't have been the case if I didn't do that. If I didn't try to meet new people, make new friends, because the people who were here before were no longer here. And I think that would have been really lonely, really isolating. And I can see how, I mean, we need friends, we need that connection. I can see how that would have driven me elsewhere. I guess for me, when it comes to will I be going anywhere? No is the short answer. I guess a lot because of my masters and my work. And, when I qualify in a year's time, we have to do X amount of hours to be fully qualified. It's a whole thing. And I am really passionate about psychotherapy. I really want to be a psychotherapist. That's why I've invested so much time and energy. And I want to work in Ireland. I want to help people here. I want to fulfill that kind of dream of having a counselling centre, working for myself. And so for me, I've sacrificed the potential of potentially emigrating anytime soon. Um, but I've also recognized that actually, after 81 conversations, I don't think it's for me. What I have recognized, and particularly going on the Camino with yourself a couple of weeks ago, is that there is more travel in me. And I think I've limited myself, whether it was financial or just energetically or just I'm studying, in inverted commas, really hardworking. Um, I know I need more adventure in my life. I need more, potentially travel and exploration. But I also see that possible within Ireland, especially within Europe. And it's something that I'm quite conscious of now, that maybe emigration is not for me. And I think I'm clear with that for particularly the foreseeable. But I definitely need more travel and more adventure, because it reminds me that I am only 27, even though I sometimes act like I'm far older. So I need to be reminded of that sometimes. But yeah, the short answer is not anytime soon.
Interesting. It's interesting that you've literally had nearly 90 conversations, and like, I suppose in a sense, like you're talking to people and you're getting them to kind of like psychoanalyze their decision to either travel, stay in Ireland, or move abroad. But also at the same time, you've given yourself the space to explore that for yourself, and you've come to a certain decision.
Mm-hmm.
So because you feel Ireland is the right place for you right now, and having spoken to so many people about Ireland, what is what is that one thing, or like what are those kind of core things that you think people keep talking about when it comes to Ireland? What is it about Ireland that makes people want to stay and makes people want to come back?
I think for me, it's the people. And I think when I speak to people on greener fields, even when they're talking about travel or immigration or home or anything like that, it's very infrequently, like sometimes I think of a couple conversations come to mind, people are like, home is London or whatever it is. They keep coming back to people, the people that are important to them, their family, their friends, the sense of, I guess, yeah, kind of peace when it comes to walking down to the shop, knowing the person behind the shop, your neighbor, the shy talk, the wave. I think it's easy to get lost, and I've got lost. I was, the reason greener fields exist is because I was getting lost in the social media world, in the world of, yeah, like I said, beautiful sunrises and boat parties, and I was like, why am I social like them, or why don't I have this and that, and such a lacking mindset, which I definitely don't. I wouldn't want to be too hard on myself for, because that is just a place where we are at, and again, as always, I caveat this with a privilege to have the capacity to emigrate, but for me, what makes Ireland different or special to me is the people, but it's also the nature. I am a huge nature fan. I'm a huge outdoors fan. And I think there is something special about being outside in Ireland. And again, it's funny, people who even aren't into outdoors, when they come home, they want to go on that walk they used to do when they were kids. They want to go for that sea dip at Christmas, even though it's bloody freezing. They want that. And I don't know if that is everywhere. And I think out of all those conversations, we maybe undersell the importance of the people until we miss them. And that's where I'm trying to figure out, can we have that love of home without leaving? I don't know the answer to that
Hmm.
yet. But I think it comes back to the people and maybe the place, as in the physical location, or what it meant to you, or those Irish summers in Tremor or things like that. Because I think we go away, and at different times we go away, and from conversations, I say now I've gone away, even though I haven't, to explore the world, and then maybe we come back, or some of us come back at least, and recognize actually there's a lot to be said for where we grew up. Nothing's ever perfect, but maybe travel helps us recognize that it doesn't have to be pretty brilliant all the same.
I think this point you said about nature is really interesting. It made me reflect myself. And I suppose when I think about Ireland, and when I think about, I think about Ireland in kind of like three ways. I think about Dublin and like the kind of more busier lifestyle, social aspect of it, going out, nice food, all that kind of things, like, and the people there and stuff like that. And I suppose, I went to college in Dublin, so I think about, what that did for me, what Dublin gave me at that time, and how that was the thing that I needed at that time. I think I spoke a lot about that in our conversation on Greener Fields. But I also think about Limerick and where I grew up and home. And then the third thing I think of, and this is why I think the nature part stood out to me, is I think about Kerry. This is where I spent all my summers. So I suppose you've got better weather. You're going to be outside more. I think about walking through the Dingle Peninsula. I think about the sea. I think about like the salty air. And like, I suppose whenever I'm in places that remind me of that, I feel so intense in my senses. I notice everything. I like, the smells are stronger, the sounds are like louder, and like my feelings then like kind of almost are more strong too. And I think it's that connection to like the senses and the feelings is probably almost what draws you in.
Yeah, for sure. It's even yesterday I was in Waterford for just the day to see friends where I went to college, and we walked around beautiful Bunmahan, which is like so beautiful, and I was like taken aback by, I didn't even recognize how close we were to the coast, and you could just smell the salty air. And I don't know, I think it's funny. I think back to my parents trying to drag us around Killiney Hill when we were younger, and then we would have played a lot of sport, and so the walking became less, and now all I want to do on my weekends is be outside. But again, it's, for me, it's not just the outside, but it's who you share it with, and it's the friends you make alongside it. And I think particularly coming into the kind of autumn winter, I really want to make a conscious effort to not lose that, to get the better, wet jacket on, sorry, raincoat, wet jacket, raincoat on, to make sure I'm wrapped up, because I think that's really supportive of my well-being, and my, it's also because it's a built-in social life as well. with other things going on, I can be very easily put that down on my priority list. But after the summer and after the last couple of years, I recognize people, nature, and the connection between the two is like really important to me. And it plays a really big fundamental role in how I am at home. Because again, a lot of my friends are gone. I live with my parents. Thanks to them. I'm very grateful to them for having
Mhm.
me. It allows me to study and work part time. Um, but I also need to know that I am my own person within that as well. That can be lost when you kind of are like, am I 12? Am I 27? Where do I go with this? I think that takes more conscious effort. And I spoke to someone on a podcast before, and maybe that's the difference, is that it's a little bit easier to be yourself and be an adult abroad. And it can be a little bit claustrophobic to no one's fault of their own, because you are in your childhood bedroom and you are go back into the family routine. And I think the biggest lesson I've learned is that I have to be much more conscious of that, and bring much more awareness to the fact that I'm 27 and that I will be 28 next year and all these different things. I don't want to let this time pass because I'm not experiencing the adventures or the travel that my friends are. I'm trying to find my own adventures and travel within what I can, for the longer term goal. So that's something I'm
Mhm.
trying to really focus on.
I like that. I think you have to try and like make the most of whatever situation you're in at any moment in time. And it sounds like you're really finding those things that work for you, that give you that joy. I mean, no surprises. You're training to be a psychotherapist, so you're well versed in these kinds of things, Hannah. Um, I wanted to talk a little bit about Irish people, their connection to nature, which we kind of touched on already, but also about how, there obviously you kind of mentioned there, I want to be conscious about this going into autumn, winter. So, whether how that sometimes makes the connection to nature either more challenging or maybe not, maybe because we are so acutely aware of the weather, because we need to be prepared. Maybe that makes us more connected. And also how that ties into mental health and mental well-being, which I think you might have a few thoughts on, because of your experience. Like obviously there's like, seasonal affectiveness disorder, or like your environment directly affects like how you feel. So I was just wondering if you had any thoughts on like Irish people, like, and nature and weather and well-being. Like how do you think all of those things tie together or relate, or do you think there is a relation?
I think what makes winter probably harder now for us than maybe it did. I personally love the change of seasons. I find the change of seasons really beautiful. If I am ever to get married, I will likely get married in the middle of a change of a season, because I just love. I think it's romantic. I think it's you're very acutely aware that things are changing, which again I think we can sometimes take for granted. Um, and I think it's kind of exacerbated because we are seeing very hot weather on our phones every single day, and sunshine and socializing. And often we tend to kind of come in on ourselves. I know, I speak for myself. It's very easy to come in on yourselves in the winter because it's dark, and I don't love driving in the dark. So if I don't, all these different things. And so it's not necessarily just the weather that I think potentially impacts us, but it's what the weather prevents us from doing, which is those kind of evening walks, meeting people outside after work. And I think for me anyway, going into the kind of autumn winter now, I'm really conscious that I'm going into my last year of my masters, all these different things. And I had a really social summer. Like I got to see way more people, and I kind of think I finally am over the hangover of COVID and the pandemic, and thinking, like I said to you when we were on the Camino, that I needed to be on my own to recharge. And actually I'm recognizing that you can recharge with people, and sometimes that's really important. I know that going into autumn winter, that I need to get outside and I need to see people every week, every day if I
Mm-hmm.
can. And I think how I'm best going to approach that is going to find other people who are going to do that with me, because that then supports the people aspect that I desperately need as a person. I think a lot of us do. I think we all do, really. But also the nature aspect and bringing people together outside, doing things together, whether it's a freezing cold sea swim and you're straight to the coffee shop. And I mean, a swim is probably a little bit too much of a stretch, a dip, a 10-second dip is what I'll be doing anyway. And you go straight to the coffee shop and then you have a 4 hour conversation. I think we need that. I also think we need people more than we think. I think I'm hoping that the basis of my research for my thesis will be on loneliness in young people and young adults, because it's an interest that I have within myself, but also from practice, but also from the podcast, is that I really think we're probably lonelier than we think we are. And I think there's a lot of shame surrounding loneliness, because we kind of have this weird, like, the more popular you are, the better you are, the more social life you have, the better, all these different things maybe we grew up thinking. But I believe we're fundamentally more lonely than we say. And I'll be the first to say I'm lonely at times, 100 billion%. Very different to being alone. Lonely is. And so that's not to discredit the people around me because they're there. And I think when I look at that research and I tie in winter and I tie in nature and people in Ireland, I just think we need to think about that, put more of an emphasis on that. And my kind of conceptualization is that one of the cures to loneliness, not that we can cure it, not that it needs to be cured, is listening and giving people the space to talk and be heard. And that's without the phones. That's, often in person if we can. It's easier in nature because you're walking side by side, you're distracted. It's a lot less intense than it would be face to face. And I think if we can get more of that, a lot of us will benefit from it. And I know, speaking for myself, if I can get more of that coming into the autumn winter, if I can continue with that kind of social connectedness, giving a space for myself to be heard, but also giving a space for other people to be heard, I think that is going to be really protective of my well-being. Can't speak for anyone else's experience, but for me, I think, yeah, if I look back in 6 or 7 months and I didn't do that during the winter, I don't know how happy I'll be. That's for sure.
Interesting. I think what you said there is so true. Like, I do think, though, more people are talking about it, like loneliness, that, we all experience it, some in to greater degrees than others. And that loneliness and being alone are not the same thing. And it also kind of got me thinking around like drinking culture in Ireland. I saw a statistic recently that said that it has reduced by 30% with young people in the last 20 years, I think it was, which is a significant drop considering how integrated it is into our like psyche and the stereotypes associated with us. Like it can be incredibly frustrating sometimes. I suppose tying it back to the travel and the emigration thing, when an Irish person goes abroad, you're like kind of presumed to be somebody that can, put away 5 or 6 pints, no bother to you kind of thing. But like that is changing. And I think that ties into what you were saying around a need to listen and a need to feel heard. Because, if we are looking for those better moments, like, you go for your sea dip, let's say, in the winter, not swim. I won't be doing a swim.
No, it's too short to call it a swim, to be honest.
When I went into the Atlantic there recently, Hannah, I had the shock of my life. I'm so used to swimming in the Mediterranean, and this was in August. Like I was still like, this is freezing.
I honestly, I think sometimes when I go down to the sea, like, and it's actually my favorite time of year to swim is like not summer, because it is really cold. And I always say to people, my favorite sound in the world, or like my favorite thing to see, is people going into the ocean, because you can't be cool, calm and collected. Everyone is screaming. Their facial reactions are so real. And I think a lot of us go around trying to like put our shoulders back and like be proper and prim and proper and things like that. No one is cool, calm and collected going into the ocean. And I think it's so human, it's so fun, it's so lighthearted. And you hear those screams, I'm like, I know exactly, when I say that, I know exactly the sound. And for me, it's like humanity, and it's like humanness at the core. And I think this time of year, coming into this time of year, is the best time to swim, because it's really short, but also you're going to feel amazing afterwards.
Yeah. I mean, who has ever gone for a dip in the sea and not felt better than they did beforehand. Like, okay, it's gonna be bloody cold, but like it's amazing. I think like the rise in sea swim culture, swim in a coffee, run in a coffee, hike in a coffee, coffee then a hike, whatever you want to do. But like this is so popular now with young people. And do you think this is something that people have brought from their
Mm.
emigration experiences, or do you think this has always been something that Irish people have done?
Well, I think when you mention the kind of drinking culture, I think I have such a I would consider unique or interesting relationship with alcohol in the first place. I didn't drink until I was maybe 24. And then I went on maybe 5 or 6 nights out in Westport and Mayo when I was like, let me just try it. And then I probably went on 5 or 6 nights out, and then I probably haven't drank in a year and a half since. And I would consider myself a non-drinker now. I don't talk about it very often, but the reason it's relevant to this story is when I was younger, I felt like the biggest weirdo for not drinking. Imagine being 16, 17, 18, going all through college and not drinking. Like, I think back to my younger self and I'm like, oh my God, if I had half her bravery, I just can't. I actually am like, wow, she was really, really brave, as in past me was really, really brave because it was so unusual at the time. And again, you were considered like, I considered myself, I guess, for a very long time, like a complete dry shite. I was like, I'm not fun. I can't be fun, because I didn't drink, and I just didn't drink because I didn't want to drink. And what I've seen over the last few years, I can only describe as like this like coming home sense because, like you just said, it is. And I think the numbers, particularly in the kind of mid to late 20 age, I'm not sure about the young people anymore, but the mid to late 20 people, or particularly my friends, it's like it is so less common for someone to say, do you want to go out to the pub, than it is for someone to ask me, do you want to go for a walk? Maybe it's the friends I have, maybe it's my world, maybe it's the things that I rotate around. But I have found there to be so much more, particularly post pandemic, than when I was, I just finished college when it started. It's like a different world. Like, I'm no longer on my own. um,
Mm.
and it's kind of heartwarming. And it's this idea that there's such a huge rise in like the sober movement, the sober curiosity movement. And I'm like, 100%, it's fascinating. I listen to those podcasts because I think it's very interesting. People who went from being, relatively big drinkers to not. And I was never that. And it was something I never did. But now I'm beginning to see that I think we're all coming and meeting at the same place at the same time. And I do think there's a huge element that comes from what we're seeing online from our friends and family abroad and those who have come home. It's that lifestyle in Australia, the coffee culture, which apparently is wonderful. I've heard the best things, particularly about the coffee, but they're getting up early, they're doing the ice bath, they're doing the meditation, they're doing the group fitness classes. I think it's hitting the same time that a lot of my friends and I are hitting our late 20s, which is like a classic quarter life crisis. Everyone's on a half marathon stage. And then also, I think the pandemic really infused this sense of what's on our doorstep. How can we enjoy what's on our doorstep? So I think it's like a trifecta of things happening at the same time. And all I can say is that for me, I am so happy about it. I'm so happy that there are people who want to connect with you and see you and be your friend that's not surrounding um going out and nightclubs. And like, the idea of me going to a nightclub is so far out of my reach right now. Like, it was never in the reach, but the idea of it is like so far away. And it's not to say I don't love pub culture, because actually when I was in Westport, that was the best time. We had some amazing times with live music and pubs. And I think it has a huge place, and particularly when people who are abroad, they think about their local pub and the music. But I think for me, it seems like there is so much more of a balance between both, and that it's not one or the other. It's
Mm.
sometimes this and sometimes that. And I just
Yeah.
think the idea of those coming home who maybe have this very healthy lifestyle in Australia, all I would say is it's growing here. Only a couple of days ago, I was at a yoga and sea swim full moon event in Climby Hill. And I'm going to send a text to the WhatsApp group of my friends now and say, anyone want to do something at the weekend? I see my friends waking up early for sunrises and sunsets or going to bed late. It's here, and it's only going to get bigger, which makes me so bloody excited to be part of it. I think there is a space for everyone on that spectrum. And I'm just, yeah, younger me is like, oh my God, I finally feel like I fit in, which is like probably like so sad and happy at different times. But it's just wonderful that I think there's just a space or a broader space for community and connection, and particularly like friendship and stuff like that in your 20s. It's not all about um, naggins and like chipper at three. Like there probably is a place for that, but again, it's definitely not in my world. I'm afraid I am still that dry shite in my core.
God, not at all, Hannah. Like, I mean, you just talking about all those things. I'm like, I want to go to a full moon yoga sunrise event. I need to find one here. That all sounds so appealing now. Even you were saying I want to go and text my friends to like go, we'll like meet up and we'll go for a hike or a walk, and you're not saying, oh, will we go for a drink kind of thing. I definitely am still kind of in that phase where I will default to drink for a lot of friends. I think the nature of a lot of that is tied into because you're working during the day and then in the evening you kind of like default to like maybe going for a drink, or the same is I suppose on the weekend you're not working, so you kind of default to going for a drink. But if I was to meet someone like obviously in the earlier parts or afternoon during the weekend, then I would default to maybe a coffee. But I think I would love to be taking more of a leaf out of like, the Spanish's book here, because they go for a coffee at 7, 8, even 9 p.m. together. Probably because they're not going to sleep for another 4 hours. But you can't be getting up for your sunrises and having a coffee at 9 p.m. in the same world. It can't all go like that. But like maybe we can have, a tea. And
Exactly.
there's such a huge culture, like old Irish culture, related to community and related to storytelling and gathering around and like having a chat. But like maybe we just need to try a little bit more to remove the alcohol out of the equation there.
Yeah, I
Um,
think therapy, it's like actually we're not all scary. Like people aren't scary fundamentally, and people are fundamentally good. And if you give them a space to be heard, they'll probably tell you a little bit about themselves, and you might pick up something. And that sense of connection that is not by words but by feeling. But I just think we undersell ourselves. I mean, I undersell myself for sure. So I can hear my mum being like, "Excuse me, Hannah." But I think in general we undersell ourselves, and I think that in general there is so much to be learned from other people and their stories. And I think that's also within us as Irish people. We are storytellers. And once you get us going, we will never stop. But it's like that little bit of like, actually, your story is worth being told. That's really important.
yeah, I'd love to know like why. What is it about Irish people that we are so good at storytelling? Because like we just kind of get really animated, or like whatever way that we position it, like the beginning, the middle, and the end, we just seem to kind of like hit the mark on that. Like I've
Mm-hmm.
just really noticed that definitely from like traveling and like meeting other people. Now, obviously, English is probably not their first language, so storytelling in your second language is going to be always more challenging. But even with like British people, for example, like I just feel like the way that they approach a story is quite different to how Irish people do it. And maybe it comes from the Irish language and the way that our sentence structure is,
Mm-hmm.
our syntax, whatever. Maybe it comes from that. But just to go back to the emigration, Hannah, like, quite simply, why do you think Irish people are so obsessed with it? Like, I was speaking to another guest and I was asking him about Irish people going to America because his parents were part of that generation. And he said, well, like New Yorkers, you never hear of like a New Yorker emigrating. Like, they stay in New York. And it's like, Irish people, like, why? Like, our global footprint is insane.
Mm-hmm.
We are a nation of 5 million people, and yet you can find an Irish bar everywhere. Okay, going back to alcohol. Um, you will find like some like random like trad groups. Even when I go for like a run in the park here, there's like a trad group practicing on like a Friday morning or a Saturday morning. You'll find like just Irish people like living in the most random of places. Like, why are we so obsessed with it, do you think?
I feel like it feels like that because it's being digitally captured for the first time. I don't know the stats, but I feel like we've been doing this for a very, very long time. And I think maybe the fact that it's being digitally captured, but also the fact that we had 2 years where you couldn't read, no one was going anywhere. And so it kind of went from nothing to everything. Like that's what it felt like for me. That's why Greener Fields was born. I think I don't know if you were to literally look over history and over time, has it gone up much? I think again maybe the fact that the world is much more connected. It is it is cheaper to get to places on the other side. Australia, like it's a 24 hour, it's a full day to get there. And I think it's maybe what, $2,000 to go over. So like a huge amount of money, but compared to what it would have been in different times, I think it is more accessible to a certain extent. And I also think it's because we are looking for the greener fields. That's, I think, the whole point is, and often what I get back when I ask this question is they're looking for the greener fields to recognize that it's actually where you water it. But I do think it might be within us, or maybe it feels like it's a rite of passage, or our friends are going, or we watched Home and Away when we were younger and we wanted those Bondi Beach lifeguards, whatever it was. I think now it's there's like so much to it. It's like, yes, it's, if you're in Dublin, it's the cost of living. But then as everyone, when I say that, they like the cost of living in Sydney is expensive. I'm like, I know, but I think people try to look for somewhere else to see if it's better. And I don't blame them. I don't blame them for wanting the sunshine. And again, for me, it's like, I want my perspective and take to be something that is like, I don't know what the answer is. I've never found out, is it good to stay or go? I think it's really person specific. And I'll never judge someone for the decision whether do they hate Ireland or not, or all these different things. I just think that it feels like that right now, particularly we're in our 20s. And that's when the 20s, 30 age gap is when they're going. And my friends who are a little bit older, they're like, you wait until they come back, or you wait until everything happens. And I will wait. And I can't wait to see what happens in 10 years. And if I'm wrong, and if more people come back, or maybe do people emigrate later because, you know, kind of everything in our life is pushed later. We if or when we do get married, if we have kids, like that is all gone later, and everything like that, affording houses, it's all later. So maybe people will still be emigrating to Australia in their mid-30s and then come back in their mid-40s. I just think it feels super concentrated to myself and probably to yourself right now, because it is, we are bang smack in the middle of the biggest impact of it. And I think it's going to be a waiting game to see, have we become more obsessed with it? Or is it just because we're digitally capturing it? And every second thing I see on TikTok is an Irish person abroad. And that's how I get my guests, is all through things like that, because people are documenting. And I wonder why. And I think the only answer is we are looking for greener fields. We're looking for a place that makes sense, where we can be independent, where we can live away from our family, that we can, you know, climb a ladder, that we cannot maybe conform to the 9 to 5 that we think we were meant to. We're questioning things. We're wondering about things. We're being people in our 20s and 30s. And I think part of that story is seeing if there is greener grass elsewhere. From what I've heard, for most people, it's not about where the grass is. For some it is, or some it is London, for some it is Sydney, for some it is Vancouver. But what I'm hearing back to me is that actually it's the people, it's the place, it's who you are. You bring yourself with you wherever you go, no matter what. But I do think for some, and it seems like for a lot of people, you do have to go to recognize this, if ever. But yeah, I think the main thing for me is that we can't, it will be impossible for me to say one thing's right or the other, because we're so complicated as people. And that's a good and bad thing when it comes to questions like this. I think it's so individual. And I think it will be interesting in 10 years' time, if we're talking again, Una, to see, are we more obsessed now than ever before? Or was it just, it felt like we're more obsessed because that's what we were seeing online? I don't know. We'll soon see.
That's really interesting. I feel like you should coin the term the home and away effect.
Well, it was funny because that was actually the other title for Greener Fields. That was the title my mum wanted. I was going to call it Home or Away, as a play on Home and Away. I went for Greener Fields in the end, but those are the two titles, and I actually still have the Canva print made up of Home or Away, and it was very similar to Greener Fields. Home and Away, and the Aussie accent, and the Bondi Beach. We are influenced by ourselves, but also our family, our friends, the economy, society. It's multi-level, it's multifactual, it's classic health promotion, really. There's so much to influence us, and maybe more than we know.
Yeah. I'm wondering, it's perhaps a little bit of a long shot, I don't know, but say if we're tying immigration and like mental health in together. So obviously Irish people, Ireland, we've undergone colonization. We've had the famine, you know, and, you know, a lot of people in Ireland are do experience like generational trauma as a result of these things going back hundreds of years. Do you think that Irish people are so interested in immigration because they are running away from perhaps that generational trauma? Or is that too much of a long shot?
Well, I'll tell you, that hasn't come up in practice just yet, Una. In my 90 something hours so far in practice was as a trainee psychotherapist. But I could easily believe that, because I think we don't recognize it. We don't call it out. We don't see it. But I have to believe, like, I'm a big believer, and that's why I love mental and physical health and the connection between the two, because they are just one. And why we do things we do, why we think things we think, like the book, The Body Keeps the Score. It's like it actually does. And I think we know more intuitively than we give ourselves credit for. We're always trying to ignore our gut feeling. We're like, we're going to do the practical thing. What's practical? Or the emotional thing in your heart. And we're like, what makes sense? Or, well, people like me more, things. But that gut feeling, dear God, is it strong? And we're trying to ignore it. And I can easily believe that there is, a historical reason why we leave. And we think that maybe the greener fields are abroad because at a point in time they absolutely were, because we didn't have the food or famine or poverty or illness, and our history is dark that way. And I can easily believe that to be the case. Easily believe it to be the case, whether we're conscious of it or aware of it. Would probably take a course of therapy to find out, maybe even then. But I think, yeah, I think it's not, this is not new for us as people. It's definitely not new for us.
I think it would be really interesting to look at other nations who have a history of colonization and see if they also have higher than average rates of immigration.
Maybe that's
Like
my
in,
PhD, Una.
yeah, well, look, we've got the master thesis sorted already, onto the PhD,
Maybe it's
Hannah.
the PhD. God, if I ever sign up for a PhD, someone tell me no. I'm done. I'm done after this. I have to be done after this.
You've already, is it 3 years for the psychotherapy masters?
3 years, and then I did a master's in public health before that. So I've essentially been referencing for a very long time. So
Wow.
I have to call it at this for a little while anyway. Give me till at least I'm 30. I have to work properly soon as well. So yeah, a lot of education, but I'm very blessed and very privileged to be in this position. It's a wonderful, wonderful profession, and I can't wait to do it properly.
I see it for you so strongly, like the way, like listening to you on Greener Fields, like it's great that you get to practice like talking to people so much and you can bring that into your work as well. Like it's a lovely synchronicity to it, I think.
For sure, it's one of those things where it's one of the benefits of Greener Fields that I didn't recognize when I was setting it up, was that essentially I am practicing my counseling skills, because like what you're doing now, you're listening so intensely, you're reflecting back on, you're super present, you can't be anywhere else. You're learning to listen to people and hear them, really hear them. Which I think we've lost a little bit because of our phones, because of distractions, because of things. When we're on a Zoom here, like you're really, really here. And even though it's technology, it's a very special thing, and like, I'm incredibly grateful to anyone who gives me any time for Greener Fields. And I do find myself in practice or saying things or asking questions and I'm like, oh, that's a therapist question there. Or that's a therapist reflection. And it has been so, even working now as a personal trainer in a women's only small group personal training gym. And when I think of all three things, I think of Greener Fields, trainee therapist, and working in Victory. It is all people. It's all trying to raise people up. It's trying to give them value in their own story. It gives me, I feel better about myself when I'm in that world, because I can see that we have power to influence each other in a good way, because so much of it is negative and so much of it is tearing it down, and the world itself is so challenging. So when I can put pockets of my day that are solely left to make other people, help other people feel good or see their own story or listen, I'm like, that is special, because I feel amazing when that's done to me as well. And I just think I'm very glad now that all three things I do are help each other and help the people hopefully I'm working with. Well, maybe that's the dream, and I don't know if I actually nailed that all the time, but it's the intention behind it all anyway.
Fascinating. I mean, your enthusiasm for it all just like oozes out from you when you speak, and I must come around to the gym sometime next time in Dublin.
It's
You
so
can
cute.
teach me how to, what was it, 100 kg you were
Yeah.
doing? Hannah, that
Yeah,
is insane. Like,
I
fair
know,
play
and
to
I just
you.
want to give a shout out to the owner of Victory Fitness is the gym, but Vicky, she's the lead trainer there, and what she's built, I'm just a part of it now, but what she's built is phenomenal. And again, you want to be better and fitter, and I've always, like, my undergrad was in exercise and health science, so fitness has always been part of my life. And then I recognized you can't have physical health without mental, so it brought me down the mental health world. And now it's all kind of coming together that it's just health, it's just people, it's just, we can't separate ourselves, that we're doing ourselves a disservice if we do. And yeah, when you step into Victory, you're a person first, before a gym user. You are encouraged to push better and be better, and but not despite recognizing that you are good exactly as you are. It's like insanely wholesome, and I love going there as a participant. That's where I was this morning. But working there as well, I just think, particularly for women, it's a very, very special place. And I like literally get emotional talking about it because it's just so cool. There's women in their 60s and 70s doing chin-ups. My mum comes with me. There's loads of mum-daughter duos. And I'm like, if I ever have a daughter, the dream would be to be able to go do squats together in the gym. And that's officially the goal,
That's fab. I love that. Just before we wrap up, Hannah, I have one more question for you, and I ask this to everybody. What do you think Irishness means to you?
To me, I think Irishness is a sense of home. And I think that can be found not just in Ireland, but where you laugh the way you do, where you connect with nature the way you do, where you have that mutual understanding with someone else who you've never met, but you see the gas shorts and you're like, ah, yeah, you get it. And I think it's the perfect example when we were on the Camino together a couple of weeks ago. We were in Spain, completely rural Spain, but it was a sense of home away from home. There was that laughter that I don't think we get everywhere, that sense of crack and fun and mutual understanding, even if we're all different. And so for me, I think what Irishness means is your version of home, wherever that is, because I think they're kind of connected. For me, my home is in Ireland, but I speak to my friends abroad, and home for them or Irishness for them, I think would also likely be where they feel that sense of, you get it, you know what I'm talking about, you understand the 99 ice cream, you understand the Christmas Eve, whatever it is. And I think it's very special. And I try to connect with that as much as possible, even at home or abroad or whenever, because there's a lot of other noise in the world, and understandable noise in the world, which can sometimes be overwhelming. But if we just get out in nature, connect to our version of Irishness, I think that can only be a good thing.
I love that. It really is like cast my mind onto like many different ways that it shows up. Like you said, when you are living abroad, you see someone with like, it could be a GAA jersey, or it could just be like, I don't know, a top with says like, I don't know, like Kilmallock half marathon or something on the back of it, like, and you're like, aha. Like, I was walking in the park the other day and a fella ran ahead of me with a UL track and field top on. And I was on the phone at the time. I saw him look back because he heard the Irish accent and he probably went, there's a Limerick accent now.
It's special. It's very special. And I think that's why podcasts like this and podcasts like Greener Fields, is that what was an unexpected bonus for me is that people were listening abroad who aren't wondering if they should stay or go. They're already away. And they said they're thanking me for giving them a slice of home. And that's because it's Irish, because it's not perfect, and it's, it's weird and it's kind of awkward and all these different things. I'm like, that's Irish, that's home, that's what it means to me. And I think we maybe, in the drive to for perfection or perfect Instagram posts or striving to succeed, we might forget that there's room in our lives too for imperfection, for messiness, for home, for crack, for fun, for things like that. And yeah, I think it's wherever home is to you, you'll bring that. And I think that's what, if I was abroad, I'd be connecting to that, like my sister does and reads the Irish Independent. That's Irishness. That's special. And I think it probably will change too. I feel like it might change. It might be, I think I approach a very fluid mindset to things and flexible mindset because, yeah, I'm very open to things changing and maybe it will, but that's what it means to me anyway.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Hannah. I really appreciate you giving your time today and your thoughts, and it's really given me a lot to think about. I think you have a very unique perspective from your experience of chatting to so many Irish people at home and abroad. It's like just an amazing thing. And I think it would be incredible for you to use it in some research someday because you have some wealth of knowledge there. Like it's incredible. And
Yeah,
also
that's
just
the
thank you.
dream.
Thank you for the
That's
public service of bringing this information to us all. It's very, very, very important. So thank you.
No, thank you. Honestly, and it's for me, it's an absolute dream to do greener fields. I absolutely, like I said to you 1,000 times before, it's a passion project. It takes up time, but it's worth every single minute I put into it. I get so much out of it. Mostly friends, mostly connections like yourself. I get a sense of I've got a responsibility, a duty, of care to do it. Now I feel like it's something that is really important, but also I think it's brave to do what you're doing as well. You know, starting a podcast. Again, I think I kind of had a little bit of delusion in me. I was like, I thought no one would listen. I thought no one would care. And very quickly, I think if you care about it, other people will care about it too, because that's what I've learned mostly. And yeah, I think these stories are so worth being told. Let's get more of them told. Let's share more of it about it. This is not a saturated market. There's so many stories to be told and different takes on things. And I want to make sure if anyone is listening who wants to set up a podcast, who wants to be on, you know, greener fields or anything like that, like let's get everyone's stories told. And my dream is one day to capture it. I'd love to put into a book. I'd love to or have a hard copy of all these digital stories, because yeah, I think there is so much in our own stories, and also so much to be learned from other stories. And I'm going to keep going for as long as everyone will have me anyway. That's the
Amazing.
plan, Ina.
How lucky are we? Thank you,
Yeah,
Hannah.
exactly. How lucky are we?